Planetary opposition. It happens more often than I realised, and over the next few weeks, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn all line up for some awesome astronomical viewing. It's a Talkin Science Story of the Week. I'm Matt Miller. You're on Trekzone.
With the latest science and space news 5 days a week across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube. This is Talkin Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
Alrighty, Brad, our last story of the week. Planetary opposition. Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. They're all lined up. They're all looking good. If you're watching The Fifth Element, it's a bad thing to have them in opposition, but it's a good thing for amateur astronomy.
Opposition's a good thing for sending missions to Mars. That's why all the missions to Mars, as we talked about in the highlights, are headed, because that means by opposition, they are kind of on the same side of the sun. The best way to think about it is, the planets are like cars going around the racetrack. You want them to be on the same side of the racetrack because that makes it closer and therefore the trip a lot quicker. And as you said, then to us, more tools on Earth, it means that they are appearing clear and bright and a little bit bigger in the skies to look at. And so it's a great chance to see these planets this month in the skies.
And you don't need anything expensive to see these planets, given how everything lines up. It's quite easy to spot them with the naked eye even.
The trick to finding planets is planets don't twinkle. So stars twinkle, and stars twinkle because of turbulence in the sky. So the same reason airplanes shake is the same reason stars twinkle. Well, planets, because there's multiple points of light coming into our atmosphere, our eye kind of blends it together and we don't see it as the twinkling. And at that point, then we see it as these bright, solid points of light. So if you see a bright object and it's not twinkling, the chances are it's actually a planet. And also, as you said, planets form a kind of an invisible arc across the sky, what we call the ecliptic or the plane of the solar system. And so if you have these bright, non-twinkling lights that kind of line up, especially Jupiter and Saturn, which are close to each other, it's easy to spot the planets.
And Mars has a bit of a red tinge.
Mars being the red planet, kind of looks red. Just as Earth looks blue from Mars.
And where can people find these planets? At what time? Where are they looking to find these planets? Probably in the southern hemisphere for our listeners.
That's right. So, as all planets, they rise in the east and set in the west. So for Jupiter and Saturn, they're rising in the early evening. So that's kind of shortly after sunset. So Jupiter and Saturn are visible all night. So if you wake up in the early, or if you're around in the early evening, they're in the low in the eastern sky. But because they're visible all night right now, if you wake up early, say 5:30, 6 o'clock before sunrise, they'll be low in the western sky, kind of where things are setting. Now, Mars is rising right about after midnight right now. So it's low in the eastern sky after midnight. And by the time the morning's coming around, it's kind of straight above you. Now, the other ones are Mercury and Venus. Now, Mercury and Venus are only visible in the early morning, and they'll be, again, low in the eastern skies. And Venus is that, if you go outside and see a really bright object in the eastern sky, that is Venus. That's actually why we call Venus the morning or evening star, because it's either bright and low in the eastern sky around sunrise or bright and low in the west at sunset. So it's always kind of following what the sun is doing.
And Saturn and Jupiter are in opposition yearly. Mars comes into opposition once every 2.25 years. And that really comes down to these missions that we talk about and why it's so critical that there are these windows, because this perfect alignment doesn't happen all the time. There's specifics as to when it all occurs.
That's exactly right. And it's quite interesting with Jupiter and Saturn. As you said, right now, they're kind of just always at opposition. That's just because of how so far out they are and how long they take to orbit the sun. But it also means in 15 years, they will always not be at opposition. And as we plan things there, it could take quite a while to send these things. Now with Mars, as you said, it's about 26 months or so, roughly, for its relative opposition. And so if you miss that window, you have a much, much, much longer and just not practical trip to Mars. And it's important for Mars exploration, not just for rovers and robots and satellites and missions to Mars, but if we talk about in the future human missions to Mars, you do have these concrete windows where if you miss it or you can't do it, you have to wait till the next one, and you're kind of just endlessly chasing the Earth or Mars, vice versa, around the sun, and it just doesn't make it practical.
Brad, some awesome nighttime viewing. Around 3 to 4 a.m. is the best time to see all of this, so get to sleep early.
It's a great chance. Or, if you just are an early morning riser, you could be rewarded for once. There's a way of thinking about it that way.
Absolutely. And of course, our next episode, 410, is our uncut edition produced live. So I'll catch you then.
Take care.